literary movement, which is entitled Naturalism. And this takes place during the 20th century. I'll give you more specific dates in just a moment. But if you look at the image at the very bottom, you will notice that there's an image or picture of nature. This is very different than the Romantic period where you saw a person sort of one with nature. This is almost as if nature is in opposition to the individual or humans. If you take a look at the left-hand corner, you will see pictures of novels because during this time, during the naturalist time, much of the literary expression happened through novels. However, I did manage to pull a few poets for this unit. Let's take a look at the distinction between the realist, which is the preceding literary movement, and the naturalist. Now, there's a difference between the two. Now, there are some that say all naturalists are realists, but not all realists are naturalists. Interesting concept. Something you should know is that with naturalists, they really want to know why people do what they do and why they believe what they believe. And they feel like there are some qualities that are not going to change, and that is one, a person's social condition. The way you were brought up in this world is just the way it is, and your hereditary, that stays the same for life. So those two are not variables, they do not change. And I think that the naturalists think that there's a correlation between your social condition and your hereditary and how it actually drives what you do and also how you believe or what you believe. So the realist versus naturalist. So let's take a quick quiz. What are the beliefs of those during naturalism? Is it A, people are inherently good? B, social conditions and hereditary drive human behavior? C, people are inherently bad? Or D, there is no correlation between behavior and beliefs? Let's take a look. The answer is B. Social conditions and hereditary drive human behavior. Now, something also that's important to note is that the naturalist time falls between two or both world wars. So between 1914 and 1939 are their specific dates. And that's important to know because we take, for example, Stephen Crane and the Red Badge of Courage. A lot of his topics has to deal with war and the conditions the Great Depression is emerging during this time. So that's important. We may not see it in our featured poet in terms of topics, but it's still relevant to this movement. So 1914 to 1939. So here are some themes that are prevalent in this time period, whether it's in literature, novels, or in poetry. And there's a connection between the image here and the first piece, which says, your station in life, you are fated. Your station is based on your environment, your hereditary and social conditions. That just means whatever your station is in life, it stays the same. You were born poor, you die poor. You were born rich, you die poor, rich, excuse me. So that's what most naturalists believe. And obviously that's not true, and perhaps that's why that period didn't last so long, because those just aren't, that doesn't make any sense. But the assertion here is that poor immigrants will always be poor. And so writers during that time period believed that you could improve the poor. They were very aware and hypersensitive to human suffering. Writers in this case tried to present life as the way it is. Very unforgiving in terms of the class structure. So if you're at the very top, chances are life was a little bit better for you. But the lower you are on that hierarchy for life and poverty, the more difficult things can become for you. And this is the part I was sort of connecting to at the very beginning with the image of nature, that nature is indifferent force acting on the lives of human beings. So think about all of those things as we address the naturalist time period. So let's take a look at another quick question. What do naturalists believe? A, that people can change their station in life. B, that one's fate is already predetermined. C, humans all follow a moral compass. Or D, nature is one with people. The correct answer is B, that one's fate is already predetermined. Okay, so social Darwinism It's sort of this idea of naturalism plus fiction. So this is like a systematic racism. A lot of the things that happen in this country or in history have been misguided by the ideas of Darwinism. It's the application of the scientific principles to study of human beings, really an objective way to look at people. But naturalists believe that there's a brute in all of us. We are all beasts. And so uh, poets or novelists try to really subject characters or people or individuals in their works to very adverse social conditions. And what was really important, not so much the character, but more so the reaction of the character. So you might see in a piece of work from this time period all sorts of horrific things happening to an individual and just almost like prodding at the person over and over again until you get the reaction. And that's the goal, is to observe the reaction in people. And the other idea or concept during this time period is that inanimate objects or locations are almost the same or equal in value to human character. And we know that's not the case, which is very interesting. And people are a result of their surroundings. And to some extent that's true, but that is not always the case. So the amorality of the universe, you see these great images of man sort of struggling with nature. So what's important here to see is the emotions, the passions such as lust and greed or desire. When I see this, I think of the seven deadly sins like pride and greed and sloth and anger. The desire for dominance or pleasure, very interesting. And the fight for survival in an amoral, indifferent universe, and that's the way naturalists sees it. Doesn't mean that it's true, but that's just their perception of the world during this time. And the conflict in naturalistic works often, like we said, man against nature or man against himself. And this one is interesting because it sort of leads us into our featured poet, which is this concept of free will. Naturalist texts often describe this futile attempt, meaning this pathetic attempt of human beings to exercise this idea of free will. And it's very often ironically presented in this universe that reveals free will as an illusion. Like it's not really something that you really have a choice, but we'll give you the impression that you do. So let's take a look at our featured poet now, who in this case is Robert Frost. And the poem that we've selected is The Road Not Taken. And so in this poem, you'll get to work with it tomorrow in groups, but you should note that there are 4 stanzas, and each of the 4 stanzas, there are 5 lines. Robert Frost follows like a strict format here. There's supposedly like 4 stressed syllables, and in each line, so it's an iambic tetrameter. We'll spend more time on this poem. You can look over it, but we'll work collaboratively tomorrow to make sense out of this poem based on what we know on naturalism.